Hong Kong's years of imperial complacency ended at dawn on December the 8th, 1941, when the Japanese crossed the border and flew to bomb Kowloon. In the Empire's most isolated outpost, the small British garrison had never quite decided how to react to this awaited attack. Demilitarize and surrender, token resistance, or fight to the death. In the end, they attempted all three at once, and the position remained hopeless. Facing the Japanese 38th Division were 6 battalions from the Middlesex, the Royal Scots, and the Indian Army. 2 regiments of Canadians had just landed, but had no transport, and few could speak English. Finally, there were the local volunteers, a dad's army of over 55s. 1 private was 70. Known as the Methuseliers, they went on to defend the power station until their ammo ran out. Hong Kong's big guns all pointed out to sea. Their 3 elderly torpedo bombers had no torpedoes, and there was no prospect of any reinforcement. The Japanese occupied Kowloon within 4 days, then crossed Victoria Harbour to invade Hong Kong Island. On Christmas Eve, the colony surrendered. The victorious Japanese paraded down Queen's Road in Central, while some 9,000 Allied prisoners awaited their fate in Statue Square. They had suffered more than 3,000 casualties, and 4,000 civilians had died, most of them Chinese. This was the first time a British Crown colony had ever surrendered to an enemy, but the British general shook hands and saluted his captors. The Japanese then behaved quite monstrously, bayoneting prisoners and doctors, raping nurses, looting and killing. It was the start of Hong Kong's hidden years. Today, the lone champion of those victims and their dependents is an old soldier from Cardiff, from a district called Canton. Jack Edwards survived 3 years in Japanese prison camps, so is bonded to other prisoners by the brotherhood of pain. Freed after the war, he returned to Cardiff to find his wife had run off with an American, so came to Hong Kong to work for a property company and to fight for the rights of Japan's forgotten victims.
This cemetery is typical of Hong Kong. You've got Eurasians, Portuguese, British, Canadians, Dutch, every nationality, all fought for one flag. So it's unique in that sense. And I always make this point now with 1997 coming up and my battle for passports, that these men fought for the British flag. And I've got passports now for the men, but I can't get it for their wives, or more important, for the widows of those who were killed. And I think this is damning, and I feel Maggie Thatcher should do something about this as soon as possible, because we're losing face badly in this colony by this sort of treatment of men who fought for this so-called peace and prosperity they're always talking about, stability now. These are men who fought for it.
Why do you think, Jack, that you survived when so many thousands didn't?
I think I had a reason for living, Alan. I had a reason for waking up in the morning. Many men just died in their sleep. We had one wonderful doctor by the name of Major Wheeler, who once said to me, I said, why did he die, Major Wheeler? He said, he's died of beriberi, famine, edema, dysentery, you name it. But he's also died of disenclinitis. And I said, what the hell is that? He said, that's no more inclination to live. Don't you fall into that trap. Well, I didn't, because I didn't give up, and I had good comrades who, when I was dying, and I was dying at one time, and in the death hut, came in and gave me, jollied me along, you know, and shook me. And said, no, you've got to live, Jack. You've got to get back down that mine to get some news back in, because I was a news carrier also.
What about the Japanese guards? I mean, who were particularly sadistic, some of them? What's happened to them, do you know?
Well, they all got away, the sadistic ones. All those bad ones are still free. And even those we put away for life were freed after 3 or 4 years. Now, they're still chasing the Nazis. All the time you get in the papers, the Nazi war criminals are being brought back. They never chased one Japanese afterwards. There was a shut book on the Japanese war crimes. Now this has always left a bitter taste in the mouths of us, because all you get is the Holocaust. You get bags of media coverage about the Holocaust. Not a word about what the Japanese did. And they slaughtered millions of Chinese. There's not a word about that. They're still investigating Kurt Waldheim. Why didn't they investigate Hirohito? We know he was a war criminal. I arrested one of his own staff. In the 24 hours he was interrogated by us before he committed suicide, he admitted that the emperor was part of the committee. I'm convinced the Emperor knew all the major decisions. In my book, he was a war criminal.
You're not one of those who are sorry that the Americans dropped the atom bomb.
No, I wouldn't be talking to you now. If that atom bomb had not come down, none of us would have been talking to you. They were going to kill every one of us, annihilate them all, and leave no traces. Now, that's the order. On the front of my book, I put it right on the front of the book for that reason. So the only trouble, as far as I'm concerned, they didn't drop enough atom bombs. They ended the war, thank God. They saved us, and they saved us, and they saved all those poor chaps who would have to make a landing on Japan. That's another point people forget. They dropped it on Hiroshima, which was one of the headquarters for the force which was going to stop the Americans landing. You consider the terrible casualties that would have happened if that bomb hadn't been dropped. Now, all we get now every year is a terrific media performance on Hiroshima and Nagasaki Day. We get monks leading processions, you get left-wing consuls in the UK naming streets after Nagasaki, Hiroshima, planting blinking cherry trees. They've forgotten what those bombs stopped. It stopped the killing.
Perhaps the most melancholy evidence of such killing is in this small and pretty cemetery at Stanley, with its mass graves of some of the British Army aid group, the local volunteers who'd supported us and paid the price.
That's right. British Army aid group were Chinese, Eurasians, and of course Indians as well. And their job was to smuggle messages between camps and take messages into China to link up with the Americans who were bombing, of course, Hong Kong. And they were very brave men, very brave indeed, because they were agents, no uniforms. And two of the bravest are here. Well, they're all brave men. The Coatwall brothers, George and Jimmy Coatwall, are here. George was, first of all, leader of a group, and then he was caught, tortured to death, executed. And then his brother Jimmy took over, and within no time, he was also executed after terrible torture. And before he died, he left a death note. And in his death note, he said, "I die for my God, my king, and my country." Now, his father was Eurasian, his mother was Chinese. So he's a perfect example of the type of man I've been fighting for passports. His widow still hasn't got a passport. That's a man who gave his all for Great Britain. There were some terrible tortures, terrible executions. Not so much in Stanley. They took them to Checo, executed them on the beach at Checo. This is why this is a mass grave. You know, it says buried near this spot. And then, of course, up there is the mass grave of St. Stephen's Hospital. And that was used as a last dressing station. And, of course, the Japanese attacked across there, burst into the hospital, and bayoneted all the patients, nurses and doctors. And then in a mass grave, 100 of them up there.
Even those of you who survived, Jack, did not always have happy homecomings.
No, we didn't. We were posted missing or missing believed killed in the fighting because the fighting was so confused. So the majority of us were listed missing or missing believed killed. Some of us, but in my case, I was posted missing long before Singapore fell. So families had no news, so they didn't know who was coming home.
What about your own marriage?
Well, I was the same. I was like about 60 or 80 of us, all taken and given bad news. Some of us worse than others. Well, our wives, quite frankly, thought we'd gone, and some of them got remarried, and mine was such a case. She'd had problems and gone off with somebody else, but it was nothing. My case was nothing to some of them because my best friend went home and found all his family killed by the buzz bombs. He lost everybody, Alan. Mother, father, everybody. And another chap of mine, Patterson, he committed suicide in 48 hours. He went home and found his wife had gone off the rails, you know. These are the things which...
Your wife left you, did she?
I'm afraid so, yes, you know, eventually, but, you know...
What have you done since then?
Well, I've got a Chinese housekeeper, and I made a new life for myself here, and I hope to get married very soon, again. So, we all had to rebuild our lives. I've made the point of this in my book. That's why I call it Banzai, you bastards. They created so many problems for us. Men have had to rebuild their lives, and we're still rebuilding our lives, many of us, for what happened, because we came back marked men. Marked physically or mentally from that experience. And it's only those of us who came back understand each other. It's very difficult for those who weren't in camps to understand what it was like and what happened. So in my work here, I find this is the best way of remembering these men. I try and remember them through something positive, through fighting so that people will recognize them, fighting for compensation for them, fighting for pensions for them. I'm still fighting the Hong Kong government for a pension for them. I still can't get it, but I'll continue to fight because I think they should be recognized for what happened. And I still think the Japanese government should recognize what happened, what they caused. So this is why I continue to do what I'm doing today.
Jack Edwards also continues to control this vision of the urban future. He's estate manager of City One at Sha Tin, 10,000 flats on reclaimed land at Kowloon. Now over 70 and a sort of mayor, he's the only Westerner among the 50,000 Chinese residents who he manages, as you'd expect, like the old sergeant major he once was. Certainly the Chinese venerate age, admire continuity, respect authority. So one of Hong Kong's great foreign families wins on all counts. It's been here longer than any of them, and still runs its empire from St. George's Building. 4 generations of the local dynasty of Kadoories. Eli Kadoorie, a Sephardic Jew from Baghdad, came to Shanghai as a clerk in 1880 and created one of the great fortunes of the Orient. His wife was from London, but their eldest son, Lawrence, on the right, was born in Hong Kong. The family built its empire around the China Light and Power Company, and in 1935 Lawrence became chairman, as he still is. In 1890, their first power station produced 1/5 of 1 megawatt. Today, the 2 largest fossil power stations in the world, here at Castle Peak, provide 6,000 megawatts and cost well over £2,000 million to build. The company powers Kowloon and the New Territories, and also today, some of neighbouring Guangdong, where Chinese power is so unreliable the province suffers 4-day blackouts. As provider of all this power, Lawrence Kadoorie says he has in effect 10% of every business in the territory. As old as a century and ennobled in 1981 as Hong Kong's first peer of the realm, Baron Kadoorie of Kowloon is one of the great figures of the East, and still not an easy man to keep up with. Just along the coast, he's building China's first nuclear power station, yet he was born when Chinese women had bound feet.
Well, it's very important to be old, fortunately, in this country. It's the one consolation you have about it. I'm entitled to a certain amount of respect, and when I go to a conference or anything, I'm usually 2 nice young girls come and hold my arms if we're going up some steps. My wife follows. Don't know what she thinks of it, but anyway, it's quite pleasant. It's one of the compensations of becoming old.
Shanghai must have been a paradise for a young bachelor in those days. I mean, you were wealthy and independent.
Yes, it was a very wonderful city, and all those who lived there will tell you that they think it's unique in their experience, which I'm sure it is. It was so international.
It's rather sad to see what happened to Shanghai so quickly after the arrival of the Chinese communists.
I'm not so sure that I agree with you there, because as a general standard of living for the people, it is definitely better than it was in the old days. From the point of view of middle and upper class, of course, not so good, nowhere near. And the whole city requires a coat of paint. But from the angle of the people themselves, there's no doubt that the standard has gone up. You don't see the same number of beggars, you don't see the misery, though no doubt there is poverty, but it's not quite as bad as it used to be at its worst.
You've always had good relations with the mainland, Lord Kadoorie. They didn't see you as a foreign devil.
No, I think that's true. We have always had good relationship, because it's not been always a one-way trip. We have put back into China a great deal of the benefits that we have gained from China.
You must be a favorite son for the Chinese.
Perhaps. I think we can say it to a great extent. The family has been here now over 100 years, and I think that as foreigners, there's nobody who has done more than we have. My uncle has built schools for the Chinese, both here in Hong Kong and in Shanghai and in Canton. My father has built hospitals, and I've had quite a lot to do with these various things as time has gone on. I think the Chinese realize that they can trust us, just as we give them trust them, and together we have profited from the contacts that we've had with China and that China has had with us.
You're building this huge nuclear power station just across the border, and it took you some 10 years to negotiate the contracts for this.
Yes, to do anything in China takes time. You need patience. You need tact, you need patience, and you also need the understanding that people demand respect, and that when they demand it, it should be given, and at the same time it must be requested in turn. There must be an exchange of understanding between people.
It's your face as well as theirs.
Absolutely. Face has to be provided for both sides, and I think there is where perhaps a long association between the Chinese and the family has played an important part in the future.
GEC can't get many orders like this, I suspect.
No, I don't think there are many. You see these turbines very nicely painted blue and yellow, the same colors as Arnold Weinstock's racing colors, and there are many thousand horsepower sitting there. This was the largest export order, I think, that England has ever had. I think it's been appreciated. We have had support here, full support, first from Callaghan when he was Prime Minister, and later from Mrs. Thatcher when it's come to helping regarding this power station.
Senior partner in this massive enterprise is the American oil company Exxon, though I suspect not much happens without the say-so of this alert 90-year-old chairman, whose close-knit family can be philanthropic if their money's used sensibly, though they do like to hang on to assets, like the genteel Peninsula Hotel, twice a takeover target for corporate raiders who force the Kadoories to confront today's business methods.
It's a change in international climate, and it's one of those things that today the man who is smart and thinks he can get away with it and does get away with it is considered as a good businessman.
Lord Kadoorie, you're a great industrialist and a great philanthropist, but you go to your office every day at the age of 90. You come in here and worry them all. I can see that. I detect you're still very much the benevolent dictator.
I don't know how benevolent, I'm not sure, but that...
What do you see as a benevolent dictator? What do you see as the future for Hong Kong?
I'm very optimistic regarding the future for this reason. It serves a useful purpose as a neutral point of contact between East and West. That has always been the case ever since its existence. At first it was to sell opium. Later it became a small industry. Today it's a financial center. But the object of it being here has always been that it should be a neutral point of contact. And as such, I believe it is essential for the future. The dangers on the downside are not from England, not from China, but internal. We now have nationalism and we now have politics, two things that were not here before and which are disruptive rather than constructive.
What are you going to do yourself, sir, in 1997?
Well, if I'm here, which I hope I will be, well, if you come along, I'd be glad to give you a bottle of champagne.
Now, you're going to be 90, and being 90 in China is a pretty good place to be, I think, if you're a venerable age.
Yes, I think...
You've got a good year coming.
Getting old is as Maurice Chevalier said when he was 80, they asked him, how do you feel about being 80? He said, well, very good when I think of the alternative. I can't give you a better answer, I think, than that.
With such durable industrial leaders, Hong Kong recovered more quickly after the war than any other occupied territory. Though it had become a shell, its population less than 600,000, 1/10 what it is today. Hong Kongers then wasted little time in recrimination. All their reviving energies went into the accumulation of profit. For Chinese, it's more natural to run than to walk, and everyone just wanted to get back to business. But then on December the 8th, 1949, the communists won the war in China, and everything changed once again. Thousands of refugees running before Chairman Mao's Red Armies arrived at Lo Wu, forcing Hong Kong to close the border. But even so, during the 2 years that followed, more than 1 million Chinese managed to escape into the colony. They came not for love of the Union Jack, but for freedom and a better life, and squatted in miserable hillside camps. The very people now waiting for the Red Army to catch up with them again in 1997. When Whicker's World filmed here 30 years ago, in 1959, I wondered whether the colony was doing enough for its refugees, so I put it to the governor, Sir Robert Black.
Well, I tried as an exercise after I came here to see what really we were spending on our swelling population, and I think that it's fair to say that we are spending a third of our income, our annual income, on what follows from having this swelling population.
Do you think so that these people who have riches are showing any real sympathy for the refugees?
I think it's one of the remarkable things that's happened since the war, the awareness of a social responsibility. It's developed in these last years to a remarkable degree. We have a very large number of people now who accept an obligation to help. We have in this housing authority a number of prominent businessmen and prominent professional men who have accepted the fact that they must do something.
So to house its refugees, the colony embarked upon a massive resettlement program, moving them into the spectacular blocks which Hong Kong has never ceased to build. In its mountainous 400 square miles, where only a few are asked to pay income tax, the territory since then has rehoused almost 3 million people. But because of this constant pressure by the millions longing to leave Red China, the borders remained closed. When, some 20 years ago, Whicker's World visited the frontier post at Shenzhen, the police were as usual trying to stem the flow of illegal immigrants. Back in 1971, the frontier looked like this. Britain's colonial border with China, a nation now rejoining the world after locking itself away for decades like some malevolent Shangri-La. In these mellowing days of ping-pong diplomacy, President Nixon, a few businessmen and tourists pass into the interior, and Chinese leaders go to the UN. But thousands of China's millions still want out, still risk their lives to go where no one cares what Chairman Mao thinks. There's the country lane between China and the rest of the world. The muddy Sam Choom River marks a border 23 miles long. A Bailey Bridge, a red flag, a white guardhouse, a solitary, rumpled guard. This is the Eastern Berlin Wall. At the front edge of no man's land, the police posts a blockhouse, like a medieval fort, where Senior Superintendent Stanley Flower's men watch out for any so-called illegals.
Very few would try to cross here, of course, because there are very few points at which they could cross easily.
Now, where do they cross by land?
Well, of course, if it was absolutely clear, we'd be able to anticipate them. But in general, they tend to come up to this large mountain you see over here, called China Mountain, and they probably hide in the hills during the daytime and then attempt to get across at night.
They'd be most worried about their own soldiers, obviously. What would you do if you intercepted anyone?
If we find them, we do, in fact, arrest them.
But for humanitarian reasons, you wouldn't turn them back, or...?
Well, humanitarian reasons and practical reasons, we wouldn't turn them back here.
Today, after 20 years, that same police blockhouse remains on guard, still catching some of the 20,000 illegal immigrants, the Eyes, who attempt to escape each year. But what has changed is the skyline. The flow of Hong Kong capital into neighbouring China has had dramatic effect upon those empty fields, that meandering country lane. Shenzhen is now a sort of city suburb operating 3,000 factories for Hong Kong businessmen, who employ half the local labour force and pay them as little as 1/10 the Hong Kong rate. Because of their shortage of workers, Hong Kong companies give jobs to 2 million Chinese in Guangdong. So this special economic region has become far and away the richest province in China. The export of such flourishing capitalism must be the best hope for Hong Kong's future, a prosperous example for Peking to ponder. The commander of this 22-mile frontier district today is Chief Superintendent Mike Watson. This has to be one of the busiest frontiers in the world, I suppose. What's the throughput of people and lorries?
Well, we've got about 60,000 a day over at the station at Lo Wu, and about 5,000 lorries a day each way here at Mankanto.
What are they carrying through these trucks?
Oh, virtually everything. You name it, it's on the lorry.
I mean, it's food coming in, I suppose, and goods going out.
Both ways. Both ways.
Yes.
A lot of companies in Hong Kong are running factories in China. They're bringing it into Hong Kong to re-export.
You see, people in Hong Kong think that in '97 they'll just export Hong Kong into China. When you look at this, you think maybe they're right, because that is a bit of Hong Kong, isn't it?
Well, effectively now, Shenzhen is like an extension of Hong Kong, yeah.
And built with Hong Kong money, I'm sure.
Most of it, yes.
Now, how are the IIs getting through these days?
Well, they usually get through the wire. They can cut the wire with a bit of trouble. There is a fence protection system, so we can, in fact, or the army can hear them cutting it. And if they can get to the location quick enough, they can stop them. They can sometimes go over it, and sometimes they occasionally get round it on the flanks.
I mean, the alarm goes off, the Gurkhas leap on their bicycles and pedal into the night.
That's right. Now, if they get there quick enough, they catch them. And we're trying to reduce the size at the moment of the sections of the fence that they have to check.
I mean, it seems like a sort of joke, this, really, the idea of a Gurkha on a bicycle. But, in fact, it can be quite ugly. I mean, one poor fella was killed the other night.
Yes, just a few weeks ago, that's right, yes. Unfortunately, he went out to answer a call on his own, which, with the benefit of hindsight, I think was a mistake.
Yes. So they chopped him, threw him in a pond.
We assume that he was shot. We assume it was IIs, but of course we can't prove that. But I should imagine it's almost 99% sure.
That's a bit out of character because they're not normally violent.
No, and that's the problem. He obviously thought that these guys were going to put their hands up, and in fact, on this occasion they didn't.
Every day at 3 o'clock precisely, an unmarked van driven by a Hong Kong policeman in overalls crosses the border here at Shenzhen and returns to China last night's catch of illegals. The Chinese collect them by bus and carry them away for some re-education. Though they'll surely try to cross again another day, despite the Chinese army.
They've got a whole battalion of the People's Armed Police on the border. They've got another battalion on what they call the second defence line, which is like our closed area, which is anything from 2 to 3 miles north of the border. And they have another battalion in Shenzhen city itself. So you've got 3 Chinese People's Armed Police border.
Are they worried about catching their IIs, or do they just push them on through?
Oh, no. The border battalion on their side does chase the IIs just as we do.
Oh, they do?
Oh, yes.
Because at one stage of the game, they just let them carry on, didn't they?
Did.
And it was a headache for us.
But I think that was, I think they feel now that's a loss of face for them to be losing so many. So they do cooperate as well.
How many do you catch? What's on an average of IIs a night?
At the moment, we're down to about between 20 and 30. It varies, of course.
Every night?
Every night, yes. But that's a very low figure. When I first came here a year ago, we were catching 100 a night.
It's a curious state of affairs. I mean, there's Hong Kong over there crying out for more workers, and you're arresting them and sending them
We're
back.
sending them back at the rate of about 400 a month.
What are your relations with your opposite numbers these days?
Oh, they're very good. They've improved considerably over the years.
Do you socialise with them at all? I mean, can you
We
buy
do.
them a beer?
No, we do. They come over. We've had a New Year party over here where we invited about 20 of them over, and we go over there. We normally go over at Chinese New Year and also at the Lai Chi Festival when we're taking on the Lai Chi gathering tour.
Well, that's good news, isn't it? I mean, that's the shape of things to come. That's very good news. The lorry drivers recently were on strike while I was here, when I first came here, because they were fed up with paying bribes to the Chinese customs.
Yeah, the system I think is a bit unpredictable. They never knew what fees they were going to pay from one day to the next, and this is now hopefully being straightened out.
I mean, bang bang.
No. They say that they haven't found anybody who was responsible for taking a bit of squeeze, but they've now said that anybody who is found in the future will be sorted out.
I get the feeling the police over there are more interested in economic crimes than political crimes, really.
I think that's probably so, yes.
Now, how do they sort that out?
Well, it was sorted out in a few hours. I say, the border liaison channel worked very well. We had our people going backwards and forwards 2 or 3 times in the evening, and we eventually kept the border open until 5:30 to let all the drivers come back. But,
And the Chinese customen got in their Cadillacs and drove off, did they? What have they done about that?
well, they say they've improved the situation. I think they've declared the rates now, and they've left boxes for complaints and things like that. But I should imagine it won't change very much.
The rates are backhanders, they've declared, you mean?
No, the actual rates are for the tariffs.
The official
parking,
rate.
The official rates, yes.
I see.
Whereas before it was always kept very open, and these guys used to charge whatever they could get away with.
Make me an offer.
Well, virtually, yeah. Jump the queue.
Roger, wide approach to finals and continue, Cathay 565.
I'm jumping Hong Kong's traffic queue today with the third generation of Kadoories, Lawrence's son Michael. We're taking the easy way past the resettlement blocks into the new territories.
We'll be going out through North Pass, which is over Lion Rock, quite a famous landmark in Hong Kong.
We're off to visit the Kadoorie Farm, a working charity founded in 1951 to aid destitute refugees. As chairman of the company controlling the peninsula, his call sign is quite suitable. Hotel Mike.
Sector Combine, Hotel Mike. Hotel Mike, Sector Combine. Hotel Mike, North Pass outbound for Jubilee, Kadoorie Gap, Thailand. 4 POB. Hotel Mike, 4 POB, Jubilee, roger.
All well in the back.
Michael, you might calm my fears by telling me how experienced a helicopter pilot you are.
Well, I certainly wouldn't want to tell you all about that, but suffice to say I'm an enthusiast and have approximately 1,000 hours of helicopter flying.
1013, Hotel Mike.
Sorry, Alan, we've had a few interruptions.
No, I'm always pleased to hear ground control that cares about us.
Well, they're very careful, and I must say we've got an excellent surveillance system which we're most grateful for as private pilots. They really do look after us. I must just stop you because the farm is on our left here, and that's where we're going to land. So I'll just call them on the radio to advise.
Sector Heli Hotel Mike is landing Kadoorie Gap, Thailand Farm, and closing down. Hotel Mike, Sector Roger.
This farm is situated terraced on a hillside, and when we get down you'll have more idea of the various facilities here, which include citrus, animal husbandry, and a botanical garden as well.
It's not ideal landing pad country, this.
Well, here we have a nice pad with a big H, and hopefully we shall get down on it. I've got confidence.
So have I, Michael. I'm just trying to keep you up to scratch, that's all.
Thank you very much. Well, there we are.
Beautiful. Well done.
Now we've got a 2-minute shutdown period, and then we can get out.
Their 360-acre farm gives each family it supports 2 pigs for every sty they build, which keeps them out of the hands of moneylenders. Today, this practical charity is extended to the Gurkhas, long garrisoned in Hong Kong, who come to learn the craft of farming before being demobilized in their Himalayan villages. This clear-sighted Jewish benevolence concentrates upon pigs because they grow quickly and there's a local demand for pork. Why did your family originally start this farm?
The farm started basically as a charity. Both my father, Lord Kadoorie, and Uncle Horace, they're both brothers, felt that to help people to help themselves was the best way in getting them started. And as a result, the farm was the educational centre, produce was given to others, and pigs were given away, and from there they developed themselves as a partnership. They did the work, they received the gift, the government provided some of the technical aid.
How many people do you think have come through here?
Some 350,000 people have been helped in some way or assisted by the Kadoorie Agricultural Aid here in Hong Kong, and an extension scheme which has gone on to Nepal to help ex-Gurkhas has helped some 450,000 people in the last 20 years.
So your family has a knack of making charitable enterprises become thriving businesses. I mean, this place is almost self-supporting now?
Well, it is to some extent, but it is a charity.
Your carpet factory makes a fortune.
Well, the carpet factory started with people who were refugees as well, but who weren't going to become farmers. And that's grown into a worldwide industry, so very successfully.
You reluctantly decided to make a profit out of it.
Well, I think it's a partnership. Everyone prospers.
As we took off to visit that flourishing carpet factory, I recalled that not everyone was prosperous when, back in 1959, Whicker's World had looked at the way Hong Kong was then living and working. Shanghai, the Kadoorie's hometown, had been the heart of the Chinese textile industry. But most mill owners escaped from the Red Army, some of them bringing to Hong Kong not only their machinery, but their mill hands, and needing China light and power to get them working again. So the demand for electricity doubled. Such refugee bosses enriched Hong Kong, but I questioned one mill owner about these sweatshop conditions that they'd also brought with them.
A British MP who visited Hong Kong, Mr. Tang, said in the House of Commons when he got home that your labour laws here were the worst in Asia, probably the worst in the world.
Well, I wouldn't say as far as that, but I would say that we are concerned with a very big refugee problem here, and we have to give them a job, and then at the same time to have a job even though working under a little bit, well, not such an ideal condition so far as wage and hours of working is concerned, it's perhaps better than not to have a job.
It seems a poor argument for working somebody perhaps 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. You could work two people 6 hours a day, 5 days a week.
I will say so. It's better and more humanitarian, but then there are cases when a person wants to be fed, wants to get a bowl of rice, perhaps it's always a little bit under, well, abnormal condition as we are operating here today.
There are some 2,000 workers in this cotton mill, and most of them live within the compound and seldom go out. Now, this is the women's dormitory where some 500 of the women workers live. What are the ages of most of the young girls who are in this dormitory here?
It's about 20 to 21.
What sort of hours do these young girls work?
8 hours a day.
In 3 shifts, I believe.
3 shifts.
Now, when they're on a shift down there in the mill, do they have any meal breaks?
No, they have their meal before the shift and after shift, but in between we serve free of charge some sweet bread for them.
Yes, and they have water, I suppose.
Oh yes, sure.
So then they have bread and water, and that is all during an 8-hour shift.
Yes.
How many days a week do they work?
Well, usually 6 days in a week, but of course in changing shifts, someone will have to work a little longer.
I see. How much longer?
Well, every 2 weeks, one shift will have to work 12 hours to make the shift changeable.
It is legal, I believe, according to this British MP who visited here, for a girl to work 13 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yes.
Now, 30 years later, in a factory built as a charity to provide employment for refugees, they were enjoying different conditions, working different hours.
They would be working, I think, virtually from 9 in the morning or 8 in the morning through till the afternoon. We have industrial hours here laid down by the government.
You've got a staff canteen here for them?
Yes, all facilities, staff canteen, restroom.
When I first came to Hong Kong in the cotton mills, they were working 8 and 12-hour shifts with just bread and water.
I think that's changed. I think what you've seen is historic, and today Hong Kong, like any other world centre, operates with great benefits to the staff, the workers and everyone.
Their factory now sells its carpets around the world, even to Windsor Castle. Most of them, it seemed to me, almost indecently large. This, for example,
That one is 60,000 square feet and a very large carpet for Saudi Arabia. It's for the royal dining room in Saudi Arabia. And that's being worked on from the end, and this is the carpet here being produced. It's so long, it's already off the frame over at this end.
The small dining room in Saudi Arabia?
The small dining room, I believe, yes.
I mean, there have been bigger ones. Somebody's just given me this. I mean, this is a carpet that's as big as 2 football fields.
That's correct. And it's in the Royal Mosque at the airport in Saudi Arabia. From the picture, you can see that there's an immense amount of work which has gone into it.
Does King Saud realise there's a certain amount of Jewish philanthropy behind all this, not to mention Jewish business acumen?
I'm sure he has that realisation.
Has he?
I'm sure.
Such business acumen was much stimulated when property developers twice tried to take over the peninsula to maximise the potential of this site. Built in 1928, the Pen, in an unheard-of touch of opulence, had a bathroom for every bedroom. And today, this stately landmark and its chairman continue to proffer all that's best from Britain.
It is the single largest order that Rolls-Royce has taken, and it's an order which we've repeated 4 times. The first fleet came in 1970, and this latest fleet last year in 1988.
How many do you order at a time?
Well, it depends. On this occasion 8, but the highest number were 9, and this order represents approximately £800,000.
In this tiny territory, there seem to be more rolls per square inch than anywhere else in the world.
I think there are. Here in Monte Carlo, these are the 2 densely rolls-populated areas.
This, in its way, is one of the most famous hotel lobbies in the world, really.
Well, this is a lobby where we say East meets West. And on the side that we're sitting at now, pre-war was reserved for the respectable. And on the other side, any young lady who was single was considered to be of easy virtue.
So the right is respectable, left is easygoing.
That's the old historic thoughts on the subject.
I wonder if they'd know about that.
I don't think they do.
The peninsula was run, it seemed to me, as a sort of family business for years, with you as chairman of the board. Then you suddenly found a couple of years ago that you had a takeover battle on your hands.
The company, in fact, as you mentioned, was subject to a takeover bid some 2 years ago, and then yet again last year. And the family has now substantially improved their stake. We're just under 69% at the moment, so we trust this will never happen again.
You had a substantial holding, but it wasn't substantial enough.
It wasn't substantial enough.
Now, did the people of Hong Kong rally round to the old order, or were they pleased to see you getting a kick in the pants?
I think some rallied around, and some, of course, were watching from the sidelines, seeing which way it would go.
You see, the story I heard was that your own bank, through one of its branches, was in fact orchestrating the takeover bid against you.
Well, I'd prefer not to comment there, but certainly the merchant bank involved was 100% owned by the bank that we usually deal with.
And they were trying to get you taken over.
Well, I'd prefer not to comment.
You didn't take your business elsewhere?
No, we keep our links absolutely with the same bank.
But you've been with them for 100 years. It's rather disloyal, I would have thought.
We've been with them for a very long time, but Hong Kong's Hong Kong.
You see, these days it's gentlemen versus the street fighters. Did you have to change your own tactics to handle the street fighters?
We certainly had to wake up.
One of their awakenings can be seen at Repulse Bay, the resort area on the south coast, where they pulled down the tired old tea dance hotel that was an island institution and replaced it with this curving complex. £100 million of high-tech luxury with a centrepiece of 200 flats to rent for up to £9,000 a month. Though it's recently won an architectural award, it can seem a wee bit low on oriental charm.
Well, it depends how you view it. Charm is in the eye of the beholder. I particularly think that the old and the new actually complement each other well. And I think it actually does a lot for Hong Kong because it brings the nostalgia of the old, and yet it brings the very modern amenities which people are looking for
Is this
today.
progress or deterioration, one wonders?
I believe it's progress.
Presumably you have great faith in the future of Hong Kong, or you wouldn't be putting your money into this kind of structure.
I do have confidence, as has my family in Hong Kong. I think the needs of China for Hong Kong are its security, and I think those needs are growing every day.
What is the reason for that enormous hole up there that baffles everyone?
I was courting my wife in the United States and saw a building with a hole in it and thought that was a very good idea. When I came back, I suggested that perhaps we might put a hole in the building here because it would break it up a little bit and allow the greenery of the hillside to shine through rather than leaving a big mass. 19 models later, we produced this.
When I think of the accommodation you've given away there, 7 floors that whole is.
We actually haven't given away any accommodation because that accommodation has been added on the top. So what has come out of the middle has gone back up on the top.
Is the colouring also are you to blame for that as well?
As chairman of the company, I suppose I'm to blame for everything. But the colours we've been assured within 6 months will probably tone down to some extent. But the colours are striking.
It's a sort of Neapolitan ice cream colours.
Well, I wouldn't put it quite as that. I would say it's a colourful portrayal of sand and sea and everything one would hope for in the way of a home in Repulse Bay.
You and your family have never been tempted to take the money and run?
Not at all. My family are very much committed to Hong Kong. We've been here. Our motto is adhere and prosper. We've been adhering, and hopefully we shall continue to prosper.
What sort of future do you think there is for a place like this? I mean, when China's National Army is on patrol here.
I think Hong Kong will remain an international centre, very much a Switzerland and Asia. And I think that's what the Chinese would hope and require, the good that Hong Kong gives today to continue. And that can only take place as an international settlement, and I think they will wish this.
You see, that if Switzerland and Asia was to have happened a few years ago, it would have probably been Shanghai, which you know so well. And it didn't happen, did it?
Shanghai was a very different period and a very different time. I think we've moved forward some 40 years. The world is a far smaller place, communications are far better, and I think the needs that Hong Kong provides will continue.